about those comments made by Ben Wallace. I'm not Amazon. To put it into context, he said, you know, at one point he drove 11 hours to Ukraine to talk to them about military assistance. He was effectively presented with a list. Is this just a bit of frustration here from the Defence Minister? You know, the UK can only go so far, so fast.
Yes, and I think politicians get tired. And after an 11-hour trip, you arrive there presented with a bit of a list, and the Ukrainians are always demanding because they're fighting a war for their own survival and on behalf of a lot of other NATO countries in a more sort of abstract sense. So I think you've got to allow for the fact that people get irritated with each other, and that happens at NATO meetings all the time. You know, you've got in this case, you've got 32 allies plus guests, plus 4 other big guests: Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. You've got the EU there. Lots of people behind the scenes get quite irritated, and that's not. It's not surprising that these things happen. They rise a bit. But remember, Zelenskyy, gosh, he's been to, I don't know, 3 or 4 meetings a week in the last few months. Always turning up on video, always in his combat outfit, always having to inspect people to say the right things. You know, the mask slips occasionally, and the man is getting tired. I mean, lots of information from Kiev say, look, he's getting tired. He's not beyond getting irritable. He's getting quite difficult to work with in some ways, because this is what happens to war leaders after 15 or 16 months.
Yeah, because he's quite vocal going into this summit about Ukraine's NATO membership, saying, you know, we seem to have a lot of words, but not a lot of action in us being, you know, ascended into the alliance. At this point, on day 2 of the summit, what are NATO offering Ukraine at this point? Because there hasn't been an official invitation for membership, has there?
No, they're saying that there will be an invitation, you know, when the conditions are right. I mean, NATO's never given a time frame to anybody who's joined the alliance. I mean, the alliance was 12 originally, 1949, and then it was 15, then 16. It stayed at 16 for many years, and then suddenly it went from sort of 16 to 22, and then 25, 28, 30, 31, now 32. And as it goes up, it's never given a timeline to any state, and there are other states still, as we're in the waiting room, who would like to get in, and they're some years away as well. Georgia is one of them. So that's not surprising, but in the case, this is so extraordinary that here is a country fighting for its life, biggest single land area in Europe, apart from Russia itself. It would be, if it comes into the Western family of nations fully in the next few years, it'll be one of the big 5. You know, the big 4 in Europe are Germany, France, Britain, Italy. Those are the big 4. Well, Ukraine will be a 5th, would be one of the big 5 in, say, 10 or 15 years' time. So there's big things on the horizon. And nobody will give Ukraine a precise timeline, because there they are, they're fighting a war. And as Kaja Kallas said, the Estonian Prime Minister was very clear on this. She said, you know, if Ukraine came into the alliance this month, then next month, effectively, we'd all be fighting Russia. And that's not what anybody wants, including Ukraine. So what we're looking for is, when is the right moment? It's probably not the end of the war, because that will be generations away, a couple of generations away. That might be 20 or 30 years. But we're looking for, let's say, a ceasefire. And at a ceasefire point, NATO could then play this really important role in stabilising a ceasefire. But that ceasefire probably won't liberate all of Ukrainian territory. So some big compromises got to be made here.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it, to work out a timetable, and NATO, you know, the leaders probably haven't got their heads around that themselves. But we are expecting a press conference from the Secretary-General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. That should be coming up later this hour, I understand. And we are expecting new security assurances for Ukraine. What might that mean in practical terms, and will that be good enough for President Zelenskyy, who's got hot under the collar going into this? Yeah,
I mean, it'd be a lot of bilaterals. So, I mean, what President Zelenskyy is getting out of this is the respect of being given a one-to-one with President Biden, one-to-one with Sunak, one-to-one with the Secretary-General. Everybody wants to be photographed with Zelenskyy. He's the man of the 21st century. So he'll get lots of bilateral assurances. And the G7, later on today, who happen to be there, this isn't an official G7 meeting, but they're meeting because they're all there, and they are going to announce something which will have a series of words in it and security guarantees. But none of these guarantees will be an automatic guarantee to go to war for Ukraine, as Article 5 of the NATO treaty is interpreted to be. In reality, you know, there's a lot more wiggle room in Article 5 than people think. But it's actually been interpreted over the years, since 1949, as an automatic declaration that we will all go to war for any one of our members who is attacked. It doesn't actually say that, but that's the way it's been interpreted. So we're not going to resolve from that, because if we then sort of went back to what it actually says, which it actually says, where we'll all agree commonly to discuss what to do on the assumption that an attack on one is an attack on all. If we went back to that, that would degrade Article 5 for the future. So Article 5 has got to be interpreted as an automatic war article, which it isn't, but that's the way we interpret it. And we're not going to give that to Ukraine while it is still actively fighting. And so, we're back at this conundrum. Now, lots of people can give bilateral guarantees. Britain has already said that. But of course, we and the Americans gave Ukraine a trilateral guarantee in 1994 when it gave up the nuclear weapons it had inherited from the old Soviet Union. We guaranteed Ukrainian security and then forgot all about it in 2014 when they were attacked. And what we said is, well, because the Russians have actually driven a coach and horses through it, the whole thing doesn't apply anymore. So the Ukrainians keep reminding us of this. They said, you guaranteed our security in 1994. Look where we are now. We've been attacked twice since then. You've done nothing. That's not true, but, we haven't done enough to prevent it.